Hey guys, this is Savannah from earthandwater.co. Today I'm here with Marin Green, co-founder of Indie Birth. You have your own podcasts and doula trainings and midwifery program, and I'm super excited to talk to you about all of this because I have a little bit of background as a birth doula, not much at all, wasn't in it for very long, but as a mother myself in the system is when I've got semi-passionate about all of this. So you want to tell us how you got into birth work?
Sure. It was quite some time ago now, almost 20 years ago. My first daughter, actually, she'll be 22, and she was born in the mainstream way.
Mm.
I was young. My husband and I both didn't really know about any other options. So it all worked out. But like a lot of first births, especially hospital births in the mainstream, it really was disappointing in some ways.
Hmm.
And when I got pregnant again 2 years later, long story short, I decided to have a home birth. And that's really what changed my life the most, probably. And I began midwifery training when my son was just 4 months old. So he'll be 20. It's been quite a while. But it was that experience, it was that experience of being free to birth how I wanted to,
Yeah.
having my baby kept close, which was my main thing after my first birth. And it was just really a beautiful and normal experience. So I was hooked after that. And I really couldn't stop thinking about midwifery and, how to potentially support women in feeling the same way that I had gotten to feel, which was really powerful.
Yeah, because it is a transformative experience if you let it be, but we cloak it with so much, put all this gunk on top of it that it kind of takes away it. Well, it don't kind of take away. It does take away a lot of the magic to it and a lot of the delicate systems that are operating during that time, which again disrupts other things. For example, I also had a very basic, normal, run-of-the-mill birth with my first. And we could go into that, but that might take a while. So we'll just jump to the fact that they handed me this baby afterwards. And they always tell you that it's supposed to be this life-changing experience. And they handed him to me, and I was like, okay. N- okay, like where's the feelings? Where are the emotions? There were none. There were zero feelings. The only reason I felt, well, I didn't feel attached to him at all. And it probably took me, I had really, really bad postpartum anxiety. And it probably took me 6 to 8 months before I actually felt connected to him. And upon doing all of this research and stuff, I found that it was most likely due to the fact that I had an epidural. And the epidural cuts off well, it's more complicated than just cutting off the emotions. It cuts off the chemicals in our bodies, the hormones that progress birth, and one thing leads to another, the delicate system, and then that bonding hormones at the end of it when you have your baby is where I was missing that. And
Mhm.
with my daughter, I had a unmedicated birth. And as soon as they handed her to me, angels sang and never stopped singing. It's been, she'll be 6 next month. And it's just, I wish so badly that I could go back and redo things, but we learn, we experience things, we can't change them. But it did lead me into becoming a doula so that I could help people just be more informed, mostly is what I was looking for, because I found out through trial and error and as being part of the system myself that the system is not set up for our best interest in mind.
Definitely not. Definitely not. I think on every level, from, micromanagement of a woman's experience, which affects her mothering, to,
Hmm.
this bigger, like macrocosm view of destroying society, right? Like
Hmm.
destroying the attachment bond, destroying, how a baby comes into this world, so that they are then able to be controlled all through their life. So I think it's a really big scheme in a lot of ways, to just make people feel powerless. And birth is such a major life initiation for the mother and the baby that messing with that, again, can really screw up individual experiences, but I think collectively just kind of makes people, like you said, like kind of not feel things in a way, right? And that's how we're beginning motherhood. So it's quite a racket.
Yeah, it's seen as, well, it is a big deal. And man, there's so many tangents we could go off on this because, people are afraid of birth. So with my second child, I had to fight tooth and nail to get just your basic unmedicated birth at a hospital. It wasn't even that, because home birth where I live isn't illegal per se, but if you go to the hospital to get checked out or anything afterwards and they find out that you intentionally had a home birth, they call in child protective services and it becomes this whole ordeal. So, oh, but it is illegal to assist in a home birth. And midwives were illegal until just this past year. And so we still don't
Right.
have any that are up and operating yet. They're working on it. You have to, after they legalize it, you have to spend X amount of however too long of a time jumping through all the legal hoops before you can
Oh,
actually
yes, I'm
stop
well aware.
practicing.
Yeah, I'm well aware of that. Yeah. Yeah, and that's another, way of controlling people
Hmm.
through, having these licenses for women that in some cases have, learned from their elders, learned through apprenticeship,
Hmm.
don't necessarily want to pursue being told by the government how to run their business and how to run their practice. And makes it, something that is only accessible to people that have the money to do a certain kind of training or go a certain route. And in many places, especially the South, there is, of course, a history of granny midwives and lots of culture around birth attending that has really just been forgotten. Um, again, with this idea that we're going to tell you what kind of birth attendant you're allowed to have, and we're going to tell you how to do it and who's allowed in your home. And honestly, it still is shocking to me. I've been in midwifery for 20 years. I've seen all kinds of things. I've had a license, I've given back a license. I've had the CPM credential, I've given back the CPM credential. I've seen it all in a sense. And it never ceases to amaze me that people are okay with this kind of control over their private events. And birth is a private event. I can't believe it. I can't believe ever that women put up with it.
I agree completely. I've done the research in the background and how they started moving the birth scene into the hospitals around the 40s or 50s. It really wasn't that terribly long ago.
Right.
And in just that small amount of time, they've succeeded in their uh, initiative to make everybody terrified of it. They're
Mm-hmm.
all of the media, all of the movies, everything that you see, because we're really detached from birth,
Right.
especially in America. Other countries aren't so much. I'm not going to get into like which ones because I really don't know. I just know that we are very detached from it in the sense, and so much so that even women who have had multiple births still don't even understand the process or what's happening or what's normal versus what's not. They just essentially wipe their hands of the whole situation and do what the doctor says. And
Right.
that's exactly what all of your friends and family expect you to do also, because they are also afraid of it. So the hardest thing for me was doing all of this research and knowing that I had all of my P's and Q's in line. And the fact that I had to have all of my P's and Q's so in line so that when they started fear mongering me and trying to tell me what was right or what was wrong, that I could stand up for myself, which is unfair for a woman who's already going through such a transformational process that essentially takes up every bit of energy that you already have just to do, period,
Sure.
without all of the extra heavyweight of doing the research and the advocating for yourself. And then getting into that system and being at the most vulnerable you've ever had in your life and being stuck essentially because you get into that moment where you're in the midst of heavy labor and you can't really advocate for yourself, but and a lot of times you're all you have to advocate for yourself, which is why you really need to check into getting a doula if you can.
Sure, support is great. Having another woman alongside you is amazing. I also had a doula for my first birth in the hospital, and truly, it probably would have been a lot worse had I not had her to advocate for me. So I do believe that. We actually do train doulas as well through Indie Birth. But my perspective has definitely shifted over the years in the way that, the system as we're painting it is pretty accurate, but it does also exist for a reason. And I think it's easy to be like, oh, they did this to us, and oh, the patriarchy, and blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, women have to want to take their power back, right? That's my podcast is called Taking Back Birth. Like, it has to come from somewhere. And maybe it's your doula educating you, right? Like maybe it's your neighbor having a home birth. There has to be some kind of internal motivation that women hear about or feel
Mm.
to investigate a different belief system. And that's really what it comes down to, because the hospital is perfect for some people. That system of fear and birth is chaos and it's disaster and we're going to control it for you. That's not what I believe, but some people do. And I think that's the perfect place for them to be. On the other hand, there are more women now than ever that don't believe that. They believe birth is a natural process. They're healthy. They want to take responsibility for their babies, for their bodies, right? And so it's really getting the word out and educating women that there is a choice. There is a choice to be made, even if no one in your family has ever made it. That's what we're up against now at this time in history. It's time for a shift. But again, I don't think it's a blame thing. And it's not blaming women either. It's simply saying, like, you have a choice, and I'm going to show you, maybe through education or videos, how birth actually works, how it actually looks. If you have a cat or a dog or a cow or a horse, there are things they need to birth. And why do we respect that in the animal kingdom, but we don't respect that in the human world, right? So there's knowledge. There's also intuition. There's helping women connect with this deep wisdom that is inside of them. Like you said, it's only been a couple of decades since women birthed at home. Most women all over the world have always done that.
Mhm.
So it's not so far back in our history for us to connect with some of that knowing. And you know what? There's a lot there. There's traumas, there's fears, there's all kinds of things we have to face. Working with women for 15 years on my own as a midwife, I would say that the women that have really amazing births, yeah, sometimes it just happens that way because birth is a mystery for sure. But a good percentage of those women have worked really hard. They didn't just fall into home birth and have a baby fall out. They had to really face a lot of stuff in their past, in their history, again, in their ancestry. And they had to decide something else for themselves.
Yeah, there's lots of inner work that I feel needs to be done leading up to it, which the making birth sacred again kind of touches on, because you have to really acknowledge your fears and work through those before you get to the labor day, because there's so many times your emotions and your fears can really tense up your body and keep labor from progressing. And which also brings us back to it being a personal thing. The mother has to feel comfortable in order for everything to move forward most of the time, not always, because it is a complete mystery. We don't know. It'll work this way with one woman and that way with another every single time. and be completely different between birth and birth, even with the same mother. It's just a complete mystery, completely random sometimes. But anyway, we put them in these brightly lit hospital rooms. I know when I had my daughter, luckily 45 minutes after I arrived at the hospital, uh, on purpose. That was exactly what I was trying to accomplish. But I got in
Right.
there and there was all of the lights were on, and I had these nurses that it was multiple, it was like three nurses that I had never met before in my life. And they were running around me all chaotically, which didn't help my anxiety. And then they were insisting that I needed to strip all my clothes off. And so, while I'm going through this transformational process in my life, I have all these strangers demanding that I get naked. So I'm like, okay, well, I just had to kind of in the middle of or in between contractions, I was trying to like get my mind okay with taking my clothes off in front of all these people. And then they started rushing me because I wasn't moving fast enough. And, so just it's problematic in a lot of ways. But if you're at home in your own space, you're able to feel more comfortable. And if you know, for centuries, births were assisted by those who were closest to you, your mother, your aunts, your sisters. I think it matters a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, of course. I mean, birth is how we come into this world, and we come into this world with whatever energetic resonance we're born into.
Mm.
So that is a simple fact, I think. And the truth is, most of us, unless we were born at home, and I was not, most of us were born into fear ourselves. So
Mm.
what we're really looking at is the deep trauma of our own, right? Of our own births that also has to be faced before we can even consider what birth is. And I think that's the fear in our culture as well, is it's stockpiling, right? We've got like a couple generations now where this has been the reality. And even for guys, even for partners, it's important to look at when we have, free workshops. We do indie birth workshops in different places. And really, it's just about showing how birth works through birth videos of our own clients that we have permission to share. And they're beautiful. They're beautiful, amazing videos where nobody touches the baby but the mom or dad. And if the baby does need something, maybe I gently help or whatever. But it usually just blows people's minds in a great way, but also, can bring up different fears and different issues because of the myths that people have been taught, right? So, like cord around the neck or different things we're supposed to be afraid of, it's not actually true. Most of it's
Mhm.
not actually factual. It's just like a movie, like a Hollywood
Mhm.
movie that they want us to believe. Most of the time, especially when a woman does feel safe, she doesn't feel like people are watching her. She's relatively healthy, all of that. Birth usually is sort of boring in the best way. I mean, thank God over 15 years, I've only attended a handful that were eventful in some way, right? That needed some kind of emergency help or support. Most babies, most women are able to birth like nobody is there, right? Because that's how we were made. So people have to be willing to look at that, look at their own fears, and again, look more closely at some of these myths rather than just believing everything that's put in front of you.
You want to go over some of the most common myths? 'Cause I know you mentioned the cord around the neck, and yeah, that's definitely one of them.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I think in every single workshop I've ever taught, somebody asked that question. And it's great. I love that question. And there are a couple of videos, even one of my own births, where I have my own baby, and you unwrap the cord. It's not a big deal. And I think people need to see it in a way because it's so instinctual. It's so instinctual. A mother that is like coherent, and, when she sees her own baby, if there's cord around the baby's neck, she's going to unwrap it, even if I wasn't there, even if I didn't say anything. I've seen it a lot of times. And I'm not great at numbers, but the statistic I think is pretty high. Babies that are born with cord around their neck, it's like 60% or something, maybe
Yeah.
more. And it's for a great physiological reason, and it rarely causes problems. So, it's typically talked about in a way where the whole story isn't really included, right? So if someone does have a difficult birth, let's say they do at the hospital or not, and they go to the hospital, maybe they get a C-section for whatever reason, and they find that the cord was around the neck. Well, it's easy at that point to blame the cord, right, for whatever problems happened in the birth. But again, seeing a lot of babies come out just vaginally at home, it's a pretty common thing. And knock on wood, I've never seen it be anything eventful, actually. So that's just one of those things people are really scared of.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I Another one is the aspiration. Uh I had when I was pregnant with my daughter, I had my doctor tell me that she had seen someone almost die from eating one French fry. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know. But I had gone over my birth plan with her, which had been, light eating and drinking was on the birth plan. I was trying to get her to okay it because studies are out there that it is not problematic to eat and drink during labor. Um, in fact, it helps you keep up your stamina and your energy. It's a really good thing, especially if you're eating certain things like, I don't know, hydrating fruits, we'll say, or honey packets are really common. And so that's a really common myth out there. And the problem, the thing that gets me is that we have all of these studies that show that our standard practices that we practice with every mom and baby are not only unhelpful, but a lot of them are harmful. And again, we don't want to play the blame game at all. The doctors themselves are a product of their system and their education. The school that they went to taught them XYZ. So they're just trusting their teachers, which is what any of us would do, I suppose. But we do have to continue learning as we move forward. Also, a lot of obstetricians are trained as surgeons primarily. And
Yeah, all obstetricians
yeah.
actually are surgeons. So again, it's useful. Surgeons are useful when there is a true emergency. So I'm grateful for them. But they actually are not trained in normal birth. So if they saw the kind of births I do at home, they'd probably just die of a heart attack out of, complete loss of control, not because anything was wrong, but because they wouldn't be able to probably function or
Mhm.
imagine that their help wasn't needed. But again, it's the belief system. I don't think I mean, there are a few exceptions in the obstetrician world. So I don't want to group everybody in. There
Sure.
are a few out there. But generally speaking, I don't think most people become obstetricians because they really believe that the body works well at birth. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. They're there to cut someone open. And again, that's great when you need it, but it's not so great when you want someone there that understands how the human body actually births. And that blows my mind. Like, if they're scientists, how did they leave this out? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did they leave out the actual physiology of a female body? How did they get left out of their education? I have no idea, but it's not left out of midwifery education. In fact, that's a huge bulk of a midwife's education is just what's normal. How does it actually look when we don't mess with it? Because
Mm-hmm.
we need to know normal before we could know what wasn't normal.
Mm.
And the same for women, right? Like, you're not all going to become midwives, all the pregnant women out there, and that isn't expected or reasonable, but you have to know what normal looks like. And watching normal birth videos, they don't even have to be home births necessarily, although that's your best chance at not getting a birth that's super interventive. But unless you know what birth looks like, how can you even know what you want?
Yeah. Uh, Breech birth, there's lots of myths around that. If you're breech, then, or if your baby's breech, that almost automatically signs you up for a C-section.
Sure. And that's based on a faulty study from many years ago. So, it's kind of like, what's the expression? I don't know. I can't think of the expression, but it's like that happened. The study was faulty and it just kind of like took off. So maybe telephone, kind of like a game of telephone, that breech birth is dangerous, but actually that's not what the study said at all. And I'm not even a study person. So honestly, I don't even care. I think women should decide based on how they feel about their own body and their own baby and listen to what their baby wants. There's plenty of women, I'm sure, that have a breech baby that probably shouldn't have a vaginal birth. Maybe it's not safe for them to do that, right? Maybe there's something going on. Maybe the placenta is in the way. Like there are very good reasons to not do that. But the majority of women have a pretty normal situation. And the only way they're going to really know that in a lot of cases is to do a self check in. There's only so much ultrasound can tell you, there's only so much a study can tell you. At the end of the day, it has to be good with you. You have to feel safe making the choice you're making. Nobody can tell you. So I actually don't like studies at all. I think they're dumb.
Yeah, have you heard of the nocebo effect?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So those who don't know, nocebo is the opposite of placebo. So placebo is an effect that it happened without a reason. Um, and nocebo is, for example, interventions and quote unquote problematic things in birth skyrocketed when we introduced ultrasound to every mother and baby.
Mm-hmm.
So coupling the ultrasounds with the surgeons who are looking for problems, because that's what they're doing. And we don't blame them. Again, we don't blame them for that. That's how they were trained. It can be good in some instances, but if you're looking for problems where there is none, you should go into it assuming everything's normal until you have a reason to believe it's not.
Yeah,
But we do so many tests and so many tests. We're looking for problems. And if you're looking for problems, then you're almost always going to find one.
you're definitely going to find one. And that's the story of millions of women every day.
Mm-hmm. Every
That's
day.
the story of their pregnancy. Oh, everything was fine until, and it's something that as a midwife, probably for me, is kind of like I don't know. You don't know based on one blood pressure reading or one urine stick or anything, usually, that something catastrophic is going on. And I do remind people of that when I can, even women that aren't my clients, right? It's like if you're pregnant and your doctor says this or that, or you're going to need to be induced or whatever, just take a moment. Like none of this is urgent. Very rarely are there choices that you need to make right this second.
Mhm.
So take your time and figure out what's going on and what your choices are and what you want for yourself. Because I think there is so much like snowballing and
Mhm.
bullying, really,
Yes.
of women into all kinds of crazy stuff. And, I've had so many women over the years that have come to me as a result of those situations. I can think of one woman years ago who they wanted to induce her at like 30, something ridiculous, 34 weeks because her baby wasn't growing and she was a VBAC and she had a stack of paperwork, a foot and a half high of every test, every ultrasound she had ever gotten. And she brought it and, she wanted to have a home birth. And as a midwife, I don't just assume that the doctors are wrong. Like I really do take the time to look through all this stuff and, use my own hands on her belly and get my own assessment of what I think is going on. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm not. But anyway, in her case, it felt really normal. Her baby felt a normal size. Um, there were questionable things in the paperwork, like different people doing the same test. Like there wasn't a lot of consistency. Long story short, she had a beautiful VBAC, vaginal birth after cesarean at home in her birth pool. Her baby was exactly the same size as her first baby, just a normal 7 pounds.
Hmm.
There was nothing wrong. There was nothing wrong. And they were going to cut this woman open at 34 weeks. So it's nothing I did. I really honor her. She's, one of my best friends now, actually, because I just like fell in love with how powerful she was and is. She was the one that was like, I'm not going back.
Mhm.
I'm not doing that anymore. I didn't convince her. I was like, okay, if you want a home birth, like I feel good about it, whatever you want to do. And she was like, yeah, I'm just absolutely not going back. And she's had two more babies at home since then, and probably will become a midwife because, her whole life was completely transformed from her own power, which is so incredible. And, I love seeing it.
It is beautiful when you allow the process to, because it can empower you. We can go into this, unsure of ourselves and our body, and we can come out the other end just shook by how powerful the experience was and how, we rocked it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, I think for people listening that do feel scared and do have fears, that's normal. It's normal to feel that way and to have to work through it. And this woman I was just speaking of, she didn't not have those things. Like she definitely did, but she made her choices and kind of walked through the fire. That was the choice she wanted to make. That was the risk she wanted to take. And the healing came on the other side. So I think sometimes we don't get that right away in
Mhm.
birth, in pregnancy and birth. Like we have to work for it, and it's not till we're through it that we can really absorb the lessons and how powerful we are, because birth is uncertain. Birth is uncertain. Like nobody could guarantee you anything. And I think that's another myth in the medical world, in a sense, right? Like, oh, birth is safer in the hospital. And people have this very delusional idea that they will live and their babies will live. And,
Mhm.
that's mostly true in general because we are resilient creatures and we're meant to birth. But, things go horribly wrong in the hospital. And people don't seem to want to accept that the doctor is not God, that
Mhm.
he or she can't promise you a live, healthy baby, even though they do say those things
Sure
occasionally, at
do.
least to people, right? And they pull the dead baby card too. Oh, if you
All the
don't do
time.
what I want, your baby will die. And it's like, nobody has those answers. So I think there's something with home birth in particular. Yes, the setting is different. Yes, it's all different. But the main thing that's different, I think, in the people is that deeper understanding of life and death and responsibility, and the fact that no one really controls that, rather than believing, someone else is going to make this okay for me. That's just not birth. Like if anyone's being honest, it's just not birth. Nobody can say that.
No, it's absolute chaos. You can do
Yeah.
your best, but nobody can control it,
Well,
all of it.
yeah, it's beautiful chaos most of the time. Again, I think there are criteria that we can work towards, and all picture the best. And again, 99% of births do go that way. I'm just saying that when they don't, and it's a whole other topic, not all babies live. Like there are things that happen in birth, and that's outside of what somebody can do. Although I am biased in a sense, I think the hospital is more likely to screw things up, by messing with what's going on with a
Hmm.
woman and a baby. Technology, why do people think that's the be all and end all, as if it saves people? It's like it often does the opposite,
Hmm.
because our bodies do know what they're doing. So, yeah, it's a big discussion.
It is. I was terrified to go into the hospital and have my baby the second time around. I was the
Yeah.
first time also, but not as much so because I was younger and just didn't know as much and
Yeah,
whatnot, and
same.
have you.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I was terrified that I was going to fall into this cascade of events that led to something that I didn't want. Um, I don't think I know anybody who's been pregnant and hasn't been fear-mongered about having a big baby. They'll
Mhm.
start telling them around 30 weeks that their baby's getting awfully big and that they need to start watching it, and they may have to be induced early because the baby's too big. And That's probably the one thing that I have had to be like, no, till I'm blue in the face about. Because it's the most common thing that I've come across, is what I mean. And most of these women have had gestational diabetes, but not to the point to where, there are problems with gestational diabetes. I get a little irritable about the big baby one, though.
Sure, there's a lot of irritating things about telling women lies. And I think the problem with that lie and many other lies that go alongside it is this deeper, and it's not even an insinuation, I think it's super obvious, this deeper obvious view that you are flawed, that you as a woman are a machine that might be broken. And we, the medical industrial complex, we are responsible for facilitating this machine and this product that is the baby to get here safely. Like, we have totally separated women and their emotions and their souls from their bodies in this process. And that's how women are seen in that model. Again, I don't love it. It's not my thing, but that's the belief system. You're just kind of on a conveyor belt, and it must all look the same, because if it doesn't all look the same, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to handle it. And of course, there's no prevention, there's no talk about nutrition or anything that would actually help somebody be
Mm-hmm.
more likely to have a nice, healthy baby. So even that, their idea of a healthy, or their idea of a big baby, to me is just a normal baby, but they don't give
Mm-hmm.
anybody any instruction on how to be healthy, or how to nourish a pregnancy. So they're seeing things that are really warped and outside of, again, the natural process.
Yeah. Two things on that. For one, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no way to know how big a baby's going to be. They judge it by how long. Like they measure the length and then they kind of do some math and throw out a guesstimate, right?
Sure. And it can be off like plus or minus, I think it's 2 pounds in either direction. So
Which is
it's
a
a
lot.
huge range of error. And I'm not a machine either, but machines, midwives, not machines, midwives are taught to assess weight with their hands. So
Okay.
again, I'm not perfect at it, but I'm usually pretty close. And even the mother, I mean, ask the mother, forget about my hands. I ask the women I'm working with, how big do you think your baby is? And it's like, don't think about it, just how big do you think they are? And most of the time, they're really darn close. So, you know, ultrasound again can be useful. I can think of a couple situations where the information gained was helpful, but more often than not, it's just being used as routine. It's just routine
Mm-hmm.
insurance money, right? And the information that's being gathered isn't really terribly useful. And it's
Mm-hmm.
usually sort of used against people in a sense. I mean, very rarely is it like used for anything really helpful.
Yeah. Going back to the nutrition thing and coupling it with the gestational diabetes thing, they test every single one of them for, you have to drink the Kool-Aid. You got to drink the
Yeah,
Kool-Aid.
it's a racket. I don't believe in gestational diabetes. I think that doesn't make any sense to me after working with hundreds and hundreds of women. Again, these are possibly healthier women than the average OB is seeing,
True.
just because, again, they're women that are taking responsibility and really care
Hmm.
and blah, blah, blah. But I don't believe in gestational diabetes. I think there are women that are diabetic, and maybe they become diabetic in pregnancy. And yes, we should be aware and they should be tested. And, in my case, I don't know that I would even care for a woman that was a diabetic at home, although many midwives have and do. I don't have that experience. So I would be honest about that. And, if the woman developed diabetes suddenly in pregnancy, then she needs a specialist and she needs to, receive the medical care that's necessary, because there are real risks, of course, to having diabetes in pregnancy. But gestational diabetes is like a made up thing. It was a made up thing back in whatever decade that was, probably the 50s. And it just started labeling women, and the insurance money came rolling in. It's not true. The label isn't accurate, I'll say. I think what is true is that women's bodies change in pregnancy. So the way they handle sugars definitely can change. The way they handle carbohydrates definitely can change. And we can be attentive to that so that, they're not feeling it. They're not having wide blood sugar swings. But with attention to diet, again, I've never seen it outside of a woman that is actually ill with a medical condition called diabetes. I think gestational diabetes is a bunch of nonsense. But there are women that are not eating well. That I will give them that. There are women that are not eating well. They're eating a lot of sugar, which is dangerous to a baby, diabetes or not, right? So there actually is a discussion there, and there are risks, but this slapping a label on everybody,
Mhm.
no, not cool.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with hypoglycemia when I was about 13 or 14. So I've always had sugar issues,
Mm-hmm.
issues with my blood sugar. And getting completely off topic, sorta, was given zero information on how to manage
Yeah.
that from my doctor. I was told that I needed to eat more often, was all I was told. And the problem with that is that if you're eating all of the wrong things, it doesn't
Right.
matter.
Right.
And me being a kid, didn't know any better. So
Right.
anyway, fast forward to my 20s, I lo and behold figured out on my own that my hypoglycemia was completely manageable with diet, and not
Yeah.
even a huge diet change, just less sugar, less carbs, more fruits and veggies, more protein, really not a
Yeah.
big deal. But by the time I became pregnant with my son, I I had not eaten I hadn't had sodas in years. I didn't eat candy, I didn't eat sweets, like nothing like that. And then they gave me this drink to drink for my gestational diabetes test.
Yeah.
And
It's terrible.
oh my gosh, it was so bad.
Yeah.
The way it made me feel, I thought I was dying.
Yeah. I
So,
know. And imagine what your baby was feeling.
right, and you would think that, it's in my chart that I'm hypoglycemic,
Yeah.
and for people who don't know, sugar is both the cause and the cure. So if I have too much sugar, my body overcompensates and my insulin spikes, and then my sugar bottoms out, and I usually pass out at that point. But how can you know that as a doctor that that's in your patient's chart and then think that it's okay to give them that? So then when I was pregnant with my daughter, I had to fight my doctor not to drink the drink. And I opted to appease her. I opted to prick my fingers 3 times a day and chart the glucose levels, and it was fine. But yeah, there's just a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
I had one of my friends also is very proactive in her own health and her own body and all of that. She became pregnant with twins. They'll be 3 in May. So that's how long ago this was. And that's another thing that signs you up for an automatic C-section most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot begin to tell you how proud of her I am that she fought the way she did with where we're located also, because these fights are a lot harder in some areas than they are in others. And I would peg our area to be one of the more difficult areas
Mm.
to fight this thing in. But she didn't back down, and she had her twins vaginally, which is
Yeah, that's
unheard
great.
of.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I know these things are rare, but also, women are capable, women are smart, and they really can't force you to do anything. People think they can. They can't. They can't force you to have surgery. So, I'm not saying that that's ideal to be in this like fighting mode while you're pregnant and in labor, but it's also important for people to know that they really do get to say, even if it's not fun or pretty.
Or easy,
Yeah.
especially when you don't only have to fight the doctor and the system, but you also have to fight your spouse or your parents or, any other friends or relatives who really do have your best interest at heart. They're just not informed or interested in reading the studies.
Yeah, but women take that stuff on as their own problem. And I understand that, and family and all of that definitely can sort of wreak havoc, even in a home birth situation. I've definitely seen it. So, yes. But also, I think it's another place where women are given the opportunity to step into their power, right? There's nothing like motherhood to make you the mother, like make you the mother you want to be. And again, I see it at home as well, especially with first time moms. They can really struggle with that. They really might struggle with what their mother thinks or what their family thinks. And it's not my business at the end of it. Like I can only offer what I can offer. But the women that are able to work through that and really claim their power as the mother, end up also mothering a lot more easily, because if you think people are going to tell you how to birth, those same people are going to tell you how to raise your child. And I
Hmm.
think there's a limit to that. Like family help aside, sure, but people offering unsolicited opinions, judging your choices as a mother, no, I don't think people should put up with that. That's what it is. Like you're not a kid anymore. If you're pregnant, you're having a baby, you are mother, and it's a huge cultural thing as well to step into that. And we don't honor that. Many pregnant women, like you're saying, are treated as if they're complete infants.
Hmm.
So that is definitely a problem. And are those the kind of mothers that we all want to be? Like, I don't think so, but that's where it begins.
I agree. It definitely sabotages your own confidence as a mother, especially if you're brand new at it and you haven't done it before.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge issue. Again, I think largely cultural, in the sense that we're not really raising our children with other women, right? We're not seeing birth. Most people having a baby have never held a newborn. So we're like really out of touch with any of this stuff. And so rather than, again, maybe going forward and trying to find support or different information, most people are just, still accepting kind of the way things are and the way they were birthed and the way they were parented. And that's all well and good, but, it's sort of not working in the bigger picture, the bigger scheme of the world, I would say. We have a lot of problems in the world that I would say are due to the way people are birthed and the lack of attachment. It's a huge issue in like trauma and that kind of thing.
I agree. I firmly believe that there's no greater way to make a difference in our culture and our world and making it a better place because, there is a lot of problems out there. And there's no greater way, I think, than supporting mothers and or new parents and babies. Like they should be they are the core of our society,
Mm-hmm.
but we've pushed them to the background for so long that, it's the age of information. And the best we can do at this point to move forward is to keep talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so much from, before birth, and of course, what we've been talking about, pregnancy and birth, and then into mothering and raising a child. There's so much that can be new to people that is available. I think a lot of the information is really great out there and available. So people have to want better. I think that's what it comes back to.
Yeah. It is a lot to sift through though. Where would you if someone was just newly found themselves pregnant and they want to start looking into the best options, where would you say their best starting point would be?
You should listen to my podcast. I have like 200 plus episodes, and it starts at the very beginning of one of my pregnancies. Let's see, my seventh pregnancy. So she'll be 10 this week. So that podcast is almost 11 years old and starts at the very beginning with nutrition and prenatal testing and making choices and prenatal care. And those episodes are so old, they're actually not on the apps anymore. They're probably just on our podcast archive. But, 200 episodes, there's got to be something in there to get you interested and excited about this new adventure you're on.
Yeah. I'm sure that you'd be happy to answer questions. How could they reach out to you or find you?
The best way is probably to join our social network. So it's a kind of like a Facebook for indie birth, and that's social.indiebirth.org. So you can fill out an application, ask to be approved there, and just check out the posts and all of the people all around the world that are in our community.
Yes, that was something that really helped me a lot was finding online communities of other mothers on the same journey so that you could bounce around your issues and your questions and your problems and find other people who are like-minded and know the research. Again, because I felt very isolated because nobody around me knew any of the research or cared to. So there was lots of I don't know if you would call it gaslighting as much as it was just, I would be like, but here are the studies. And then I would walk away from the conversation concerned about like my own confidence in it. They really degrade your confidence in yourself and your knowledge. And you walk away going, well, did I read that right? Did I see that was my source reliable? So yeah, absolutely finding other mothers and other parents online really helps a lot.
Yeah, I mean, lastly, I'd say that it really comes back to like the self investigation, which, is harder than looking up research, in my opinion, because you really have to like face some of your stuff, as we've talked about. So, I have episodes of my podcast, I have some meditations, there's all kinds of subtopics because personally, like I shared, looking to research for me felt really off. And I think a lot of women feel that way, although there's many women that find it helpful. And I think a lot of women in the middle that kind of are blending, the science with the intuition. So whatever people want to do, but also following your intuition, listening to your own body, listening to your own baby, that's not a subpar way of navigating life or a pregnancy, right? So I always want to say that because we live in such a male world in a sense where information and numbers is supposed to mean more than
Yeah.
what you feel in your body. And that is the opposite. It is actually the opposite that is true, even though many people are not practiced in being in their bodies. So that's a whole other topic. But if you are a pregnant woman, you have to learn to listen to what you're feeling. And sure, maybe compare it with the evidence. Great. But at the end of it, if you can learn what you need, then you don't become reliant on this outside source that probably is pretty biased, and that's the truth with research is that it's probably pretty biased. You're not a statistic. I'm not a statistic. It's, it is what it is. But the most reliable source of knowledge is your own self.
I agree completely on all accounts. Uh, the research is most often biased towards whoever's funding it, for sure. And nobody can know you like you do. And you do
No.
have to learn how to go in and get in touch with your body and what it's trying to tell you because it's always talking to you. We just
Mm-hmm.
have to quiet down and listen a little bit.
Yep, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing all of this with us. I
Yeah,
would
no
ask you
problem.
to share where we're at or where they can find you, but we already did that. So I guess we'll just say, have a great day.
All righty, thanks.
All right.